Welcome into NFL Bad Beats from Week 12. I'm Tim Kalinowski, joined by Nick Giffen. And it's not just the classic bad beat that you see on TV and on Twitter, but these are bad beats with math and win probability and things that often go unnoticed when you're handicapping games, especially for the future involving lucky teams, unlucky teams. Nick, I barely passed high school math. So, but you explain it in terms that I understand. So let's start with the Saints and the Falcons. The Falcons win 24-15. They were 2-ish point dogs. And we'll start here with the Jesse Bates pick six. If you had Atlanta defense first touchdown score, I tip my cap to you. Nick, this seems like a pretty lucky play if you're asking me.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, with the Saints in scoring position, there's a decent chance they at least come away with a field goal here, if not a touchdown. And so to throw an interception is already unlucky, but to also then have that interception return something like 92 yards for a touchdown, that definitely qualifies as a lucky swing for Atlanta, right? If we replay that play a bunch of times, that's going to be literally the worst possible bottom floor outcome for the Saints there and the best possible outcome for the Falcons. So definitely, obviously it's a skillful play. Don't get me wrong. And we factor in the probability that it can happen. It's just, if we replay that play a bunch of times, literally the worst possible case scenario. And that's not going to happen too many times.
Yeah, the Saints are thinking there, what could possibly go wrong? And the worst thing. How about this? Something goes wrong here for Atlanta, but I thought this was a pro New Orleans expected score, pro New Orleans lucky game. There's going to be a swing here, but I'll let you tee it up.
Yeah. So, we just saw that Derek Carr one, right? He threw an interception in the same spot, and now Ritter throws an interception, but guess what? It wasn't returned all the way for a touchdown. So even if just comparing those two, New Orleans lost out a little bit, but also there's going to be some other turnovers that come up that'll have higher win probability swings against New Orleans as well. So certainly a lucky one in their favor, but it actually almost in a way is a little unlucky because then they got the ball at like their own 5-yard line or something like that. So they have to drive all the way down the field. Certainly lucky though in preventing Atlanta from scoring there.
All right. Well, how about this one here? We got a Saints turnover. They're knocking on the door here of Atlanta. And I mean, my goodness, Nick, this is why you have New Orleans winning the game and your expected score 26-23. And also this would have helped the over because the under hit in this game as well.
Yeah, exactly. You're right. The over would have hit. We had this 26-23, so 49 points instead of 39 total points that were actually scored. And you see here, New Orleans again in the red zone, a fumble this time instead of an interception. But that's 2 red zone turnovers that could have resulted in 14 or so points. At least you'd think 2 field goals, at least 6 extra points on the board for the Saints. But no, they come away with 0 from those 2 possessions. So very costly turnovers for the Saints here.
So which of those 2 was worse, Nick, before we watch this field goal?
Definitely the pick six was worse because not only are you taking away your own points, but then you just gave 6 points to Atlanta. So definitely of the 3 that we've talked about, and Atlanta had another turnover as well that was kind of near midfield, but definitely of the 4 turnovers, let's say, the pick 6 was by far the worst. But of the 3, New Orleans had 2 of the 3 worst ones. The one at midfield is kind of, while it's impactful, it's less impactful than the other 3.
Gotcha. And obviously here is groupie 50-yard attempt here. This really would have only helped the over. I mean, this doesn't have too much of an impact. Am I wrong?
Yeah, it doesn't have a massive impact, but I mean, it still has an impact, right? New Orleans could have closed the score and then maybe gotten the ball back and tried something. But the idea is 54-yard field goal. You're making that around 60% of the time. That's still 1.67 expected points that you didn't have in the final box score that, otherwise you would have when we go towards handicapping future games. So, 24-18 would look a lot different than 24-15. That would suddenly, it would show up in the 1 score category that everybody likes to talk about. So things like that.
Right.
So, this game definitely should have been a lot closer. And actually, it should have been in the Saints' favor. I mean, the Saints outgained Atlanta. They had more yards per play. So it certainly makes sense. And with the turnover luck, they got a little more unlucky as well. So overall, New Orleans. I don't know where I'm going on the geography map here, but New Orleans did actually play slightly better than Atlanta on aggregate. just didn't work out in terms of the way things played out on the field.
Yeah, so if the wrong team winning, which you said happened, if that smelt fishy, at the very least, Atlanta shouldn't have won by that many points. And for the record, I looked it up. Groupie, 80% field goal kicker this year. That ranks 25 amongst NFL kickers.
He's had some struggles. I was hoping to become a groupie, but because I was not a fan of Will Klutz, kicker Lutz Klutz. And then New Orleans shipped him out. I was going to be a groupie, but it looks like that's fading.
Yeah, well, we'll move on to a game that felt like 3 years ago. Thanksgiving Day, Commanders and the Cowboys. Dallas just trounces Washington 45-10. You say the expected score should have been Dallas by 9 points. And, I was on Washington here. I'm an idiot. I took the points, favorites on Thanksgiving. So we're going to run through basically a highlight here of my misery as I was sitting with my family on Thanksgiving saying, how come Dallas scores every time they touch the ball? And how come Washington punts every time they touch the ball? So roll the punt wheel the punt reel as we go here. Washington, the problem is what? They're punting in Dallas territory, right?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of things here. So first of all, actual score ended up 45-10, expected to score 29-20. That's a 26.5% win probability swing. Washington, they had 5 possessions reach Dallas territory. Now, obviously they had 10 points, but aside from those 10-point drives, they had 5 other possessions that reached Cowboys territory that came away with 0 points. They had, a 4th and 1 from the Dallas 44. Here we're seeing, a 4th and 6 where they end up punting from Dallas territory. They get stuffed on a 4th and 1 at some point here. They have a Sam Howell pick 6 that came, kind of later in the game. So the idea is Washington actually was able to move the ball. They were able to get into Cowboys territory, and we saw it from 10 points on some of those drives. But with the amount they moved the ball, the amount of times they moved it into Cowboys territory, they should have, on aggregate, again, moved the ball even further to at least grab some points via field goals or touchdowns, and it just didn't work out. Here we see them, again, getting stuffed on 4th and 1, a play that, the Eagles would just do the brotherly shove, and they'd be getting that first down there, but Washington unable to do that. It's just kind of like I said, just a sum total of failure on the Redskins' part, but the Commanders' part. I grew up being a fan of them for 40 years, so it's still ingrained in my head here. No, it's just a sum of failure on the Commanders because they just were unable to, get the ball past the sticks when they needed to, even though they were able to move from their own territory into Dallas territory plenty.
Well, those last 2 failed conversions are why Ron Rivera is saying, hey, Nick, that's why we punted. I'll ask you this. Is the problem with the punting, does that have more to do with the percentage of rolling the dice on 4th down, or the fact that net you only basically move the ball 25, say 30 yards, flipping the fields per se, or is it both?
It's some of both. It's some of everything, right? Like even on 4th and 1, whether they punted, I mean, obviously then they're just sacrificing expected points. So it's just bad coaching decisions. But in other times, if they don't convert it, as we saw there, they didn't convert a 4th and 1. That's just unlucky because half the time or so, maybe they will convert it. And this half of the time they didn't, and they'll keep the drive going. So it's a little bit of both. But the idea is when they put them, even agnostic of like coaching decisions or anything like that, when they put themselves in this position 5 times, they should come away with some points, and they didn't.
At least one. Give me at least one. And just to cap it, Nick, Dallas basically, they scored almost every time they touched the ball, a touchdown, as a matter of fact, basically.
It was interesting. Now, Dallas, they did punt the ball 3 times. So it shows Washington had drives where they were able to stop Dallas. And if we had interspersed some of those drives where they were able to stop Dallas with the touchdown drives, then all of a sudden, instead of looking at 5 touchdowns, 3 punts, maybe we're looking more like 4 touchdowns, 4 punts, or somewhere in that neighborhood. So it's just kind of the order of the plays shook out to where, they were able to. It's like if you're playing Monopoly and you roll the dice and you get doubles 3 times in a row, you've made it almost all the way to go and you get sent back to jail. Well, the Commanders never sent the Cowboys back to jail. They just let them get past go every single time. So that's kind of what happened here.
Collect 200. And also too, so basically like Dallas with all the touchdowns, they get the maximum expected points every time they were scoring, right? There was Washington was never cut a break per se.
Exactly. So that is why the Commanders were the second most unlucky team of Week 12, but the third most unlucky one is the one that grinds my gears the most.
Yeah, I mean, my goodness. Look, I was on Buffalo plus 3.5. It felt good to get the hook there. It matters. And the actual score here was Philly 37, Buffalo 34 in overtime. But Nick, the way you ran the numbers, Buffalo should have won this game by 3. And if you watch this game, it was an incredible game. But in terms of Philadelphia luck, it's just trending up and up and up. And I guess if you're a one-loss team this deep into the season, you're gonna have some luck on your side. But I mean, the Bills, come and take it, will you? We start here, the drop touchdown, and then what do we do, Nick? We go backwards. It's infuriating.
It's unbelievable. Yeah. I mean, if you catch that, and this isn't the Eagles doing anything good. Let's be clear. The guy just drops the ball. It's the same thing with Marquez Valdez-Scantling the week prior. The Eagles didn't do anything good. The guy just drops the ball, right? So if Cook catches the ball here, that's a walk-in touchdown. That has nothing to do with Eagles' skill. MVS dropping the ball has nothing to do with Eagles' skill. They have just been getting lucky, like incredibly lucky. Guess what else is not a skill for the Eagles? The Bills false starting here, and then the Bills false starting on the next play. That is not a skillful thing that the Eagles did. They didn't draw a false start from the offense. Usually the offense is trying to draw an offsides, if anything. No, that was 2 false starts. Takes them out of field goal range, and the Bills go from a dropped touchdown to punting. Just a horrible swing there.
And it was funny, and I think Romo on the broadcast at first said that Cook didn't drop it, it was broken up, and then they showed that clear replay, and it was like, nope, the Eagles had nothing to do with this. And then again, well, if you continue on, the Bills are going to miss a whole lot of field goals, and I mean, you could say the conditions, whatever, that was no problem for Jake Elliott at the end of regulation. So, what say you about what we're about to see in some missed field goals?
Yeah, missed field goals, they happen, right? And so we account for that in our expectation, right? The expectation here of a 34-yard field goal is to make it a good chunk of the time. And instead, that wasn't even like great rushing there by Philadelphia. It was just a little bit of conditions, and Tyler Bass just doesn't get this ball elevated whatsoever. So, maybe you can credit the Eagles a little bit here. That's definitely a good play there to kind of get through there, but it should have been elevated a lot higher, and Buffalo should have come away with some points. And then here, once again, we have a longer field goal, but so a little lower expectation, even adjusting for the conditions, lower expectation. But Buffalo unable to convert 2 field goals that, frankly, this game wouldn't have gone in overtime if they had those 2 field goals. And we've got Jake Elliott teed up here for a 59-yarder at the end of the game. And this is the lowest probability of them all. And of course, he nails it to send the game to overtime. So just all the kicking luck also ended up on Philadelphia's side.
Yeah, I know. It's like, hey, if you're Tyler Bass, like you're kicking Buffalo. It's not necessarily like it's South Beach. Like you should be used to the poor conditions. And, Jalen Hurts, capping what seems to be, MVP front runner after this game right here. The guy does it all. You got to tip your cap. But I mean, you're shaking your head.
Yeah, I'm not on the MVP train here. Obviously, the quarterback on the team with the best winning record is often the MVP, but I'm not all about that. If you look at the stats, things like EPA per play, etc. Jalen Hurts kind of 5th, 6th, 7th in there somewhere. So, I mean, Josh Allen has been better this year, just in terms of not just counting stats, but like efficiency stats. Obviously, the interceptions we've talked about before with Josh Allen has been a bit unlucky. But look, both teams in this game, to be a little fair to the Eagles, both teams did have 45% success rates, showing this was kind of an equal game. Buffalo did get unlucky with the kicking game and lost the penalty battle. Let's not forget that. That was certainly, we saw the back-to-back false starts, part of what changed the outcome of this game. And Philadelphia, for as bad as they were in the first half, I mean, they were abysmal in the first half. They really turned it on in the second half and in overtime, scoring 4 touchdowns, a field goal, and only having 2 punts. But if you kind of average those drives and average, again, the sequence of plays, you only get to 27 points for Philadelphia. And here's two other notes that I want to credit some other sites for. So Pro Football Focus had, so our expected score is 30-27. There's what they call, it's like a noise removed score or something like that, was 31-22 for Buffalo. So even wider gap than we had. And of also for DVOA, for FTN's DVOA, of all the teams that have been 10-1 at this point in the season, the Eagles are the 3rd worst in DVOA. And the only 10-1 teams that have won the Super Bowl since then, since 1985, there have been 6 teams that started 10-1 won the Super Bowl. 5 of them had a DVOA above 30%, and the Eagles are down at like 14% or something like that. And a whole chunk of teams down there below 20-25% did not win the Super Bowl. In fact, only even 2 of them made the Super Bowl out of a large number of them. So Eagles certainly not sitting pretty in terms of historical numbers for 10-1 teams, given that they're the 3rd worst 10-1 team in the past 40 or so years.
That Pittsburgh team jumps to mind when you mention the worst 3 DVOA when they started that season on an undefeated run for a while.
Yeah, but
so
they weren't 10-1. They were 11-0, so they didn't count in that graphic.
Oh, okay. All right. Fair enough. Fair enough.
He's just talking of 10-1 teams.
Yes,
the Eagles were the 3rd worst 10-1 team
Gotcha.
in history.
Gotcha. So I was even being generous that Philly was, or that Pittsburgh wasn't in that stat as well. I'll ask you before we leave here. Buffalo won the coin toss. Is that lucky? Where does that fit in?
It is lucky. Yeah, certainly it's lucky in that is completely non-controllable. But at the end of the day, it's the plays on the field that matter. Buffalo made a field goal. Philadelphia got a touchdown. So even if there was, some luck in that, it kind of washed out. So, it is what it is.
Yeah, exactly. Well, Nick, I appreciate it as always. Love going back and forth with you. Love learning something. Hope that our viewers learn something. Make sure you read Nick's Lucky Teams, Unlucky Teams on the Action app, Action website. Appreciate it, Nick Giffen. That is NFL Week 12.